When I'm older, I want to be just like Sonic 2. Spread. Because this thing is all over the place. Pretty much every console that has come out since the Sega Genesis, and especially since Sega went third party, it gets Sonic 2 in some way, shape, or form. Of course, that's a little bit of hyperbole. Not every single console out there. Off the top of my head, like the GBA, that only got Sonic 1. Didn't really. But for all the consoles it missed out on, I think Sega's making it up with how much Sonic 2 is on the Switch. Yeah, a couple companies have a bit of a funny little thing they do where they just keep re-releasing the same game numerous times on the same platform, specifically the Nintendo Switch. I know Pac-Man is another game that has numerous versions on Switch. I mean, some of them are basically the exact same. Others, you know, you might have some argument as to the validation between that version compared to another version. But Sonic 2 is another game that just has multiple versions of it on Switch. So, you know, I might as well talk about a couple of them, why they exist, and maybe, you know, what sets that version apart from the other versions. So the first way to play Sonic 2 on Nintendo Switch is via the Sega Genesis Classics compilation. I have some crazy mixed feelings about this one right here. It's not a bad deal, it's not a bad collection, but I just think it's a little tacky. It just doesn't feel like the cream of the crop way to play Sonic 2 or any of these other Genesis games. It's perfectly fine, but there's just something about it that feels a little cheap. I appreciate the aesthetic choice to put this all in a 90s kid's bedroom. That's really cool, but looking at the 3D models here, it's very obvious that this is on a pretty limited budget. And at that point, it kind of takes away a bit of the pizzazz of it all. And sometimes it actually gets in the way of the actual interface because they put it in this 90s bedroom with a with a day and night system. A lot of times, the lighting of the games is just kind of hard to tell what I'm selecting. So then I have to go to the clock, and I have to, change the time of day and all of that. You know, it's a little more complicated than it's worth. But when it comes to playing Sonic 2, it plays Sonic 2. One thing I really like about this collection, though, is all of the settings you have. One thing that's really cool is not only does this collection have rewind functionality, which is kind of the hot thing with retro game re-releases these days, but fast forwarding, which I think is awesome. It's kind of a weird thing that this is one of the only ones that I've noticed that includes that feature, but a lot of times you just want to kind of get a move on. Sometimes you gotta wait around for some things in these games, and I really love that, yeah, you can fast forward through the game. It's awesome. And in addition, you just have a ton of emulator settings here, which does really help to kind of make the game look and feel exactly how you want it to. But it doesn't really feel like a tailor-made experience. It feels like something where you can kind of go in here and make it work for what you want. But a lot of these options just kind of feel like it's just why would you want this? Now, one problem a lot of people have stated they've had with this collection is the input lag. As we can see here, yeah, I would not say it's unplayable. But once you're kind of told, oh yeah, there's input lag, and you actually kind of, play the game and you kind of look out for it, yeah, I can definitely see lag here. It's not unplayable. Like I've said, I've played this collection quite a bit, and until people really told me, oh yeah, there's input lag, then I start to notice it. But it is still definitely doable. So it may not be the ideal, picture perfect experience, but it is still very playable. It is still very much Sonic 2. And in addition, you get a treasure trove of other games here. So 50 plus Sega Genesis titles, $30 flat, just 30 bucks, and oftentimes this game is completely on sale. There's also a physical copy, so that way you can find it cheap used. So yeah, you know, it's 30 bucks for numerous Sega Genesis games and Sonic 2. So what could be better than that? How about Sonic 2? Ah, yes, the Sega Ages line on Nintendo Switch. Many will look at this and laud it as some of the best emulation work of all time. You know, hey, I won't deny that, but I will say I feel like this line was a huge missed opportunity. So these games were developed by M2, oftentimes labeled as the emulation wizards. They are phenomenal at this kind of stuff. They are phenomenal at giving you all the options you need, presenting the game in the best quality possible, and they worked on the Sega Ages lineup of games for Nintendo Switch, which were old Sega games carefully recrafted for Nintendo Switch, exclusively for Nintendo Switch. Now, the Sega Ages line has been a thing for years now. Like I remember Sega Ages stuff back on like the Saturn, the PS2. It's just kind of a cute little title Sega uses sometimes for their legacy stuff, you know, Sega Ages, you know. But I feel like this was a huge missed opportunity on the Switch. They did a fair amount of titles, but they were pretty much all just 2D, old school arcade Sega Genesis era titles. Games that we've seen so many times before. And this was all around the time that the Sega Genesis Classics Collection was announced for Switch. So around the time that game came out, they also released Sega Ages Sonic 1. And I'm just like, why the hell would I buy Sega Ages Sonic 1? Now I know. I always knew the Sega Genesis Classics Collection was a bit assy. Like, it's a good value, but it's just the quality wasn't nearly as there. But now, especially considering the input lag, yeah, if you just buy the Sega Ages version separately, you're getting a much better experience. So yeah, there's value here. It is something where, like, hey, do you want a bunch of Sega Genesis games for only 30 bucks, and they may not be the best they could possibly be, but hey, they're still playable, and you get a bunch of them? Or do you want carefully reconstructed, perfectly emulated versions of these games for like $7 a pop? I think both definitely have merit, so, you know, I'm not gonna say the Sega Ages lineup on Switch was definitely like a waste of time, but it definitely kind of felt like that in the middle of it all, especially considering I think they teased how they would love to do Dreamcast games and Saturn games as a part of the Sega Ages line. I'm like, you f***ers. I love Sonic 1 and 2 as much as the next guy, but I am f***ing sick of seeing them. Like, give me something I haven't seen re-released a million times before. And they tease, like, they're like, yeah, we'd love to do it. And then they're like, yep, we're done. The Sega Ages line is over. Thank God they re-released Sonic 2 again. Well, Sega Ages Sonic 2 does some cool things. Specifically, you get Knuckles in Sonic 2. Which is, you know, a version of the game you'd get by plugging Sonic 2 into Sonic and Knuckles, which is really cool. We even get the specific, you know, Knuckles title screen and the whole thing, which I really like. Spoiler for a future entry in the Sonic 2 on Nintendo Switch saga, but, you know, there's Sonic Origins, which you can play as Knuckles in that game. But, yeah, you don't get the title screen. You don't get, like, the authentic experience as, like, oh, wow, this is exactly, you know, what the game was like back on the Genesis. Which I really appreciate that this is all here and, you know, it acts as exactly as it did back on that old system. But on top of being incredibly authentic, if there's anything M2 in the Sega Ages line here are known for, it's the amount of options that you have. You have a ring keep mode, a challenge mode. We can go into the settings and just adjust all kinds of things. We have the international version, Japanese version, the drop dash from Sonic Mania. We can turn that on to use in the game. Full on stage select, which is great. We can remap the buttons, which yeah, that's really necessary for Sonic. HD Rumble is in the game, which is crazy. And then display, you know, we have all these different types of screen sizes and filters. We have wallpapers. It is so much. I really appreciate all the effort M2 put into this version of Sonic 2. Now, is this the best version of Sonic 2 ever? No, I don't know. This just always kind of felt like a lot of wasted development time reconstructing these versions of Sonic 2 over and over and over again, when I think a lot of people would agree with me that one of the best versions of Sonic 2 out there was the mobile phone version done by Christian Whitehead. That was like a massive deal. It still is. The fact that it added the Lost Hidden Palace Zone level. That was a stage that was cut from the original release, but they added it back in, and they have Knuckles in the game. It's all in widescreen. The special stages actually don't give me a fucking headache. But then Sega commissions M2 to re-release Sonic 2 on the 3DS, and then re-release Sonic 2 on the Nintendo Switch, instead of just taking the Christian Whitehead version and just putting it on Nintendo Switch. It's just really frustrating because I definitely really appreciate this release. I think it is really well done and has a ton of care and love put into it, but it just feels like a waste. How many times are we gonna keep putting effort into re-releasing Sonic 2? Just make one definitive version and stick to it, and just re-release that on all new consoles. But instead, they put this on the Switch 4 damn times! And half of them were developed by M2. Here we have the Sega Genesis on Nintendo Switch Online. Let's check this out. One of the first titles that was available on this service. Take a guess. That's right, Rystar. Now, so M2 developed the Sega Genesis emulator for Nintendo Switch Online, and yep, Sonic 2 is here. Now, at the time when I'm recording this, Sonic 2 is kind of like the only mainline Sonic game available on here. I don't know why they haven't done Sonic 1 yet, or Sonic 3D Blast. I understand Sonic 3 and Knuckles due to copyright issues, but still, it's just really strange. But then, out of all other Sonic games to include, Sonic fucking Spinball. I just feel like everything about Sega Genesis on Nintendo Switch Online kinda confuses me. The fact that it's a part of the expansion pack tier just feels odd, especially considering, like, I mean, like, there's some quality stuff on here. A lot of really cool stuff. I mean, like, Mega Man The Wily Wars, that's incredible. Pulse Man by Game Freak, awesome. Street Fighter 2, you know, fucking Flicky, Earthworm Jim, Alien Soldier, Contra Hardcore, Castlevania Bloodlines, Musha. These are awesome to have here. This is like an amazing lineup of Sega Genesis games, but they are Sega Genesis games. They are so damn easy to play on any modern platform. Stuff like Contra Hardcore and Castlevania Bloodlines, that would have been incredible like 5 or 6 years ago, but those have since finally been re-released via the Castlevania and Contra collections and also on the Sega Genesis Mini. So for this to be a part of the $50 a year tier of Switch Online, feels a little strange, especially considering Super Nintendo is a part of the base tier. I understand licensing costs because, you know, Nintendo doesn't own any of these games. I get it, but it just kind of feels like a waste as a part of that tier. Like I guess it adds value, but not really. Like I said, like so many of these games have been readily available on Switch for years at this point, on the Genesis Classics collection and also via Sega Ages. I mean, yeah, now you get them for free as a part of your expansion pack tier, and the emulation here is wonderful. So in terms of a basic Sonic 2 experience, this is about as good as it's gonna get. I mean, like, this just plays and runs beautifully. Much like most platforms on Nintendo Switch Online, this just feels a lot better. I can definitely already tell input lag, not noticeable. If I compare it to the Sega Genesis Classics, yeah, that was a little gross. Well, overall, this is the basic version of Sonic 2. One thing I really like about, you know, Nintendo Switch Online is that, you know, this is very authentic. This is literally like if you pop these games into the console itself, and when I click on that, that's what it would be like. You know, you don't have to deal with anything else. You don't have to deal with any brand new menu systems or anything outside of the, you know, the actual interface of selecting a game. You know, that's kind of what it was like on the Virtual Console, on the Wii and Wii U. I feel like Nintendo really likes to just make it feel like it's just like, boom, this is what it was like on the original console. And I like that. I think it definitely has its place. You know, as nice as it is to go into these games and kind of fix them up and add new things to them, it's also nice to just see like, hey, what was it like playing Sonic 2 on the original Genesis? No frills, let's just do it. And this is the best way to get that experience on Switch. But if you want frills, well, then you have Sonic Origins. And then the updated re-release Sonic Origins Plus. You know, hey, if you want to count that as 2 separate games, you'll be my guest. So then we'd have 5 Sonic 2s. Isn't that incredible, everybody? So yeah, this is about as close as we get to what I talked about earlier, which was the idea of Sega actually taking those mobile phone versions done by Christian Whitehead and putting those elsewhere. Because these, by all extents and purposes, are those. When we enter Sonic 2 here, we will see it's in full-blown widescreen, and wow. This is really great to finally have widescreen versions of the classic Sonic games on something that my thumbs aren't in the way of. Something I find a little peculiar is how in Sonic Origins, you have 2 different modes to play these games in, Anniversary Mode or Classic Mode. And Anniversary Mode is in widescreen, which is awesome. But they also get rid of lives, which I'm just kind of like, why? As an option, sure, but if you want widescreen in Sonic 2, you can't play with lives. If you want to play with lives, you play Classic Mode, which is not in widescreen. But it's really strange because you'd assume Classic Mode is just like a basic emulated version of the ROM, you know, kind of like the Sonic 2 version on Nintendo Switch Online. No, it's still running on like the updated whatever, like versions made for this game. So as you can see in the Sonic 2 special stages, those are like fully 3D. And that was made for like the original mobile phone version. That's like an Anniversary Mode kind of dealio, but that's also in Classic Mode. They just kind of crop it to be 4:3, which is weird. You just assume that in Classic Mode, it'd just be a fucking ROM. So I just think it's really weird and frankly kind of stupid that they have this limitation. If you want widescreen, you can't have lives. If you want lives, you can't have widescreen. So instead of getting lives in Anniversary Mode, you get coins, which you can then spend throughout the rest of the game, you know, unlocking stuff in the museum, which is fun and addicting and pretty cool. But Sonic Origins has always had a lot of scrutiny around it. The fact that, you know, like I said, like they have some weird decisions like that. And there's also a bit of funkiness with the visuals. There's like this very weird, slight smoothing filter on everything where it's not like incredibly garish, but it is noticeable. Which, hey, I really like some sharp-ass pixels. You know, I very much prefer how the game kind of looks on Nintendo Switch Online in comparison. But, you know, hey, it's whatever. It's not, like, ridiculously ugly or anything on Sonic Origins, but it's just kind of weird. And the fact is, there's just a bunch of, like, weird things in Sonic Origins. A lot of glitches, a lot of inconsistencies, but overall, I would say the collection is pretty solid. I think it's a solid way to play these games, and I like all the little bonus features. I like that in Sonic Origins Plus, you can play as Amy. That's really cool. You also get the other classic Sonic games, like Sonic 3 and Knuckles, which it kind of feels like this was all an excuse to just finally re-release Sonic 3 and Knuckles. But I'll take that. I'll take it at any price. I shouldn't have said that. That's another major caveat of this release. It's pretty expensive, all things considered. 40 bucks. My God, that's $10 more than the Sega Genesis Classics collection. Sonic 2 by itself and the Sega Ages version on Nintendo Switch, I got on sale for like $4. The mobile phone versions that all of these games are based on are like $1. So yeah, I would say like, hey, this is probably the best version of Sonic 2 on Switch. I still kind of think that, But at the same time, you know, that Nintendo Switch Online version is pretty nice. $50 a year, yeah, but, you know, I mean, like, how often are you going to play Sonic 2? You can just pay for $50 a year and then cancel it after that 1 year, and that's still only $10 more than Sonic Origins, and you also get N64 games and GBA games and Mario Kart 8 DLC. I don't know. To be honest, it is pretty hard to find the definitive version of Sonic 2 on the Switch, because as ridiculous as it is that there are 4 different versions of this single game on this one platform, you know, looking at everything, they all do kind of like have their own merit. You know, the Sega Genesis Classics Collection version, that's kind of if you just want to get down and dirty, just have a boatload of classic games. You don't really care that much about like super authenticity, input lag. I mean, like, the input lag is there, but it's not make it or break it. It may be for some people, but it wasn't really for me. But then what if you only just want Sonic 2 and you want like a couple extra little bonus features included? Well, the Sega Ages version is for you. What if you want to dabble in the best of Sega Genesis? What if you happen to have the Nintendo Switch Online expansion pack? Well, you get Sega Genesis for free. I swear to God, if there is anybody that actually bought the expansion pack just for Sega Genesis, I have questions. And then if you want a more modernized experience, a more modernized way to play the original Sonic games from the Sega Genesis, widescreen, no lives, better revamped special stages, and also a lot of stuff to kind of keep you busy, like challenges and missions, then you have Sonic Origins. I actually wasn't expecting all 4 versions to kind of have like, hey, you know, there's different reasons to own each and every one of these. And you know what? If they're gonna do it with any game, you know, it's Sonic 2. It's a game no matter how many times I play, I'm always gonna come back to and just kind of, you know, blast through the first couple stages just in like a half an hour, just to kind of feel good, you know? It's just a feel-good game. It's just so fun and so amazing. Even to this day, Sonic 2 still holds up like crazy, and yeah, really looking forward to that 5th version.